afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session in the Researcher Toolbox series. My name is Daneshri Modli, and I am the customer consultant for Elsevier, South Africa. Today, we will be doing the next installation in the series, and just as a reminder to you all, share my screen very quickly. The sessions and the links to register are all available for you on the Africa Researcher Success portal. You will see them under upcoming webinars, and you'll be able to register for them here. So you just click on the heading and you'll be redirected to the Zoom page to register for the webinar. Today, we are doing the webinar, How to Increase Visibility of My Published Work. And we'll be covering the following topics, which are recap on journal selection, sharing articles, preprints, and self-archiving, layman summaries, and leveraging social media for visibility. And I am joined today by my colleague, Khaled Shalan, who presented at the last session, and this is the second session in the two-part of the series. Now, Khaled Shalan is my counterpart that works in North Africa, and I cover Sub-Saharan Africa. He is the regional consultant for Elsevier Core Research Solutions in Africa. He covers Sub-Saharan Africa and Northeast Africa. He's responsible for capacity building and supporting researchers using ScienceDirect, Scopus, and Mendeley. He actually comes from a background in academia, so he has been actively involved in the research process personally. He's worked in multiple roles in the British University in Egypt and Nile University as a teaching assistant, research engineer, and technology transfer officer. He graduated with honors from Cairo University, Mechanical Design Engineering program, where he also received his master's in 2015. He joined Northwestern University in Illinois, United States on a Fulbright grant, working on research funded by the US DOE and in collaboration with industry. Khaled is also the co-founder of ASME, Egypt section, as the former vice chair. With 6 years of experience with Elsevier, Khaled has developed capacity building programs for researchers in a wide multitude of research areas with the universities across Africa. So we are really pleased and lucky to have him here as a speaker today. Khaled, I'd like to hand over to you at this point. Khaled, can you hear me? There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Daneshri. Good afternoon, all our attendees. As Daneshri just mentioned, today will be the second half of our workshop. We started off 2 weeks ago with discussing more into how to write for visibility. Today, we're going to be building up on this with how to increase the visibility of my work. So one of the things that we would be talking about today is we will be touching base a little bit later on with the concept of open science in general. So open science, it's about making science more accessible, more useful to the broader society as well, in addition to the global research community. So it goes on with various pillars like open access, open data, open metrics, research integrity and reproducibility, and science and society. In general, open science goes along the same lines of what we're discussing about visibility in general. It also goes about science that's more useful, more accessible to the entire research community and society in general. So how does this link to the topics that we have been discussing last time and our topic today? So let's have a recap. A quick recap here is that last time we talked about preparing your article for visibility. We talked about visibility for both human readers and machine readers, which is a term just to say that how my article is being handled by search engines and other computer algorithms. So for human readers, we did discuss some tips to grab human readers' attention with attractiveness of titles, highlights, effective abstracts, visualization and media, proper structure, strong content. And we talked about machine readability and search engine optimization in terms of using or lacing your articles with the trending keywords in the keyword section, in the captions, using metadata for whatever images you're using, linking and having a dense network of linking to your article in general. So just let me take a minute or two here and see if you have any follow-up questions from our last session. Also, if you haven't been able to attend last session and there is something that doesn't seem very clear, you can put in a question using the Q&A. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you feel that everything is clear and you have no questions, please also let us know on chat. Anyone on chat or Q&A?
We got one message so far, which says all good so far. Anyone else? If you've got any questions from the last webinar, you can let us know, or any comments so far. Okay, so most are saying so far so good.
Perfect. So as far as things go, when it comes to promoting your already published research, there is one thing that we have to go through as a recap. I know that there has been multiple sessions on the topic so far, probably many that you might have attended yourselves, but as a recap here, the journal that you are picking as a venue for your publication is actually your messenger to the entire academic community. So again, if I'm choosing a journal with very strong presence, and again, if you remember what we talked about search engine optimization, a lot of that is done by the publisher anyway, and we were talking about extra tips that we could do from our side as authors. But about discoverability of my article, that burden lies mainly with you, the publisher of your paper. So I'm going to be just going over some tips about the journal that you decide to entrust with your work. And I'm going to talk in general. So one of the key things that you would want to avoid definitely are what's called the predatory journals. So in general, making the right choice in a journal increases your readership, increases citations, diminishes publication lag, influences performance evaluation. Bad choices are usually for research that will not get the credibility that you would need and the certification of the peer review process. Nowadays, there are sadly, many journals that claim to have peer review or scientific standards when these journals are just running a scam for money. So we have seen that what's called as a term, if you might want to look this up for your reference, what's called sting publishing. So what is sting publishing? Because some people were a little bit uncomfortable about some of the journals, so they tried to actually test these journals to see how far they are willing to go to accept papers that are not scientifically sound. So they would deliberately prepare an article that has very nonsense. So some people actually wrote up a paper and they were talking about Pokemons in the middle of discussing some scientific idea, or discussing song lyrics in the middle, and they would send it to journals, and that journal would publish literally anything. So again, one of the things that I don't want my hard work to appear in a journal without scientific peer review or without scientific credibility. I don't want my paper to actually be defamed by by the ethical problems of the journal that I am selecting to publish myself with. There has been multiple attempts to fight journals that have this kind of predatory behavior. Blacklisting has had very limited effectiveness, sadly, while because many of these journals actually would actually either go into some legal disputes with the issuer of the blacklist, or they could actually just change their name and ISSN. And it turns into a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, where you are trying the journal just changed its name every time, somebody calls it a predatory journal. Some people have actually tried to even change the publisher company name and still run that kind of scam. That's why we do recommend whitelisting as a better approach for fighting off predatory journals. We have a whitelist as in the Scopus database. Every journal that gets into that Scopus database have been verified independently by academics and librarians to be working with proper quality and proper scientific methodology there. And the choices are really wide for you to pick on. There are currently more than 28,000 journals that are currently indexed into the Scopus database. Some 6,600 of which are fully gold open access journals. So fully gold open access journals are journals that usually require an APC to publish in, but there is also about 22,000 journals that are either hybrid or subscription journals as well. And again, so it's very important to be able to put your faith into the kind of journal that will carry your message to researchers in general. There is a lot that goes into the curation process of the titles that gets indexed into Scopus. They have to be rigorously re-evaluated to maintain the credibility of the journals in that list. And as a final point to add here, there is a very excellent tool online that can help you think about and think about the journal or the conference that you're trying to submit to. It's called thinkchecksubmit.org. I strongly recommend it to check some of the advice they have about selecting journals for publishing and making sure that these journals are trustworthy. There is another parallel for that website for conferences called thinkcheckattend.org. The Scopus list of journals should be accessible to you. Even if you currently don't have a subscription to Scopus, just go to scopus.com. You should be able to see that list of journals there. If you have full access to Scopus, then you can do some advanced analysis to find which journal suits you best. So that was just a recap on selecting journals for publishing, but now your journal, I'm going to skip forward to the point where your research was accepted for publication or that you've already submitted your paper. What can I do meanwhile? So there are three aspects to discuss here. One is how to share the full text of my article. Second one is how to enhance the visibility of my already published article. And the third part is sharing your research data to audience as well. So in general, your article goes through different stages. So the early stage of research is what's called a working paper. That is still a paper that you are working on improving. This is not the version that you will submit to a journal. A preprint is the version that's ready for submission to a journal. There is the peer review process itself. And after publishing, we usually define sharing into three realms, what's called scholarly collaboration networks, institutional websites, personal outreach. About wider public access, there is what's called green and gold open access, and I'm going to be discussing share links. Let me ask you just here for a minute, which of these terms that you see on screen you're familiar with? Working papers, preprints, green open access, gold open access, and share links. So just let me mark them a little bit. So working papers, preprints, scholarly collaboration networks, green and gold open access, and share links. Are you familiar with any of those terms? Let us know on chat.
Okay, so I'm just going through the chats that's coming through. There is a request from Leslie to know more about what share links are. Malcolm, you say you have a question. Please send your question through. And then people would like to know more about preprints. Okay, and so the question that Khaled has asked is, if there's any of the words that he has underlined on the screen that you'd like more information about in the session, to let us know in the chat box. Or if you know what these words are, have you used any site to access this kind of content? So from Tishana, have heard about all of them, but don't know much about any of them. Okay, thank you, Tishana. And then Ezinam, I'm familiar with preprints, institutional websites. Okay, so Khaled, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a brief explanation of these terms, it will help.
Perfect. So, as a quick recap, pardon me. Pardon me, can you hear me well now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. So, as a quick recap here, the article basically goes through three main stages in order to be published. So the first one is what's called the preprint. A preprint is the version that the authors have written. This is the version that they feel is suitable to be submitted to a journal before peer review. So basically the preprint has no contribution from anyone outside the authors. There hasn't been any added input from the editors or the reviewers or the publisher to that. So it's basically a plain document that you have prepared your manuscript, and this is the version that you are submitting to the journal to be published. So the question is, who owns the preprint? Since no one else did any contribution to that preprint other than the authors, it remains as purely their intellectual property, and they are free to share it. However, there are some cases where some journals might ask the authors to delay publishing their preprint. So again, that's the stage where this is the research that you have written. This is not peer-reviewed, and this is something that you own and can freely share. However, some journals might ask you to delay sharing your preprint until peer review is concluded. Okay. For example, these are journals that work in double blind. So how do people share these preprints? There are what's called preprint servers. So people share the early stage research, the research that they have written up as a preprint without peer review. These are called preprints. There are many famous preprint servers that specialize in sharing this kind of early stage research, like Archive and like Elsevier's SSRN, for example. And authors can feel free to share their preprints there, and it gives visibility to your research work even before it has been peer reviewed by or accepted for publication. So that's a case of an early stage visibility that you can enrich your article with. And I have mentioned here that there are some journals that will ask you to delay posting your preprint online. For example, in case of journals that operate a double-blind peer review, we now no longer use the term double-blind. We prefer the term double anonymous. So in case of double anonymous peer review, the reviewer must not be able to identify who the authors are. If the authors have posted their preprint online before peer review, then any reviewer would be able to know the authors of the article by just typing the manuscript title on any search engine, and the reviewer would be able to know who the authors are. In that case, the journal might ask the authors to delay posting the preprint until the acceptance or the completion of peer review. But in general, the general idea is that authors can share preprints whenever they want. Okay. After peer review, as you know, reviewers usually send feedback to authors and requesting revisions or modifications to the manuscript. So the manuscript is modified on multiple times until it reaches a stage that the editor and the reviewers can accept for publication. This revised version after peer review of a preprint is called an accepted manuscript. And generally, this is what the editor sends over to the journal operations and the publishing team in order to appear on the journal, on the publisher website as the last enhanced form of what's called published journal article. This is includes copy editing, formatting, pagination, online enrichment of metadata, and what we talked about the search engine optimization and the discoverability of the article. So the published journal article is the version that you can find online on the publisher website. So what is the difference between an accepted manuscript and a published journal article? So the accepted manuscript and the published journal article should have basically the same content, but the accepted manuscript is not formatted or copy edited or enhanced electronically to be the published journal article. So the difference between the two, an accepted manuscript is still a plain Word or LaTeX or PDF file. This is the formatted file that appears for the publisher, the added contribution like the technical enhancement, pagination, formatting, copy editing, and others. So the accepted manuscript represents a case where there is a contribution from the journal editor and the journal reviewers, and the published journal article where there is significant input from the journal operations and journal publishing team as well. Okay, so when can I share each aspect of the article? What can I share publicly and under what conditions? So as I mentioned, preprints are becoming a very famous norm within the entire academic sphere. There is a question on chat, and please, if I may remind you, please try to put the questions on the Q&A. It keeps questions easier to track so that we don't want to lose track of any question that you ask. So there is a question, is sharing my unpublished work safe? If unpublished work is freely available, does this not tempt people to steal data and publish elsewhere? This is a very important question because preprints are actually the opposite of that kind of fear, because once you have published, posted a preprint online, it has your name, it has the date of posting it online, and nobody can use that preprint data without citing the preprint itself, which in that case will actually prevent people from plagiarizing your work earlier on. Posting preprints can be very useful, especially when you are looking at some of the fields which have very long review cycles. So like social sciences, for example, and this is why SSRN first appeared to focus on social science. However, it has expanded ever since 2019 to include hard sciences as well. So again, and in some of the cases, this can fast track how your research output appears to everyone else. So we've seen this happen with the outbreaks for Ebola and Zika viruses, for example. This has happened with the COVID, but it's very important for readers to know that the early stage research on a preprint server, whether it's SSRN or other, has not been peer reviewed, has not been validated scientifically, and as of such, it should be very carefully used by readers and especially decision makers. Okay, there are what's called a preprint, which is again the same version of so that was actually during the COVID period. So a preprint a preprint is again the same version that you feel is ready to be published, to be submitted to a journal. A working paper is a version that you are still modifying. You still have not submitted that paper for peer review, and you're still willing to actually improve on it, but you can still put it early on. And this actually, for very fast fields, this can be useful because sometimes when you're working in a very fast moving field, so let's say computer science, for example, sometimes by the time your paper goes, you write up your paper, you find somebody else who has beaten you to the punch, somebody who's published on something very similar to what you're working on, and now they have taken the precedence there. So posting things as a preprint is a way to actually boost the visibility of your work and timestamp how early you were able to achieve that idea, earlier than what would happen through the peer review process itself. It's useful to keep track of the things that people are currently working on, but it's very important to know that preprints have not been peer reviewed. Imagine that an article that has been read 1,500 times before it completed peer review even. So people are actually, and usually when I post a preprint, I denote if I have submitted it to another journal, if it's being under peer review at some place, and people will be looking, and once it has been accepted, I can go back to my preprint and say that the published version of this article is available on this DOI. So actually people can cite the the published journal article there. Again, there are many other preprint servers. SSRN is Elsevier's. It's free for you to create an account, to upload articles, or to read other preprints. There are other very famous preprint servers like Archive, like Repec, and others. So the question, how can I share my article? It depends at which stage you want to share your article at. If it's the preprint, then there are some rules. If there is the accepted manuscript, and if it's the published journal article, there are a different set of rules for each stage. For a preprint, authors usually can share their preprints anywhere, anytime, as we mentioned. If the preprint was accepted for publication, it's encouraged that the authors link their preprint to their formal publication by the DOI link. So this can actually help readers cite the the peer-reviewed version. Authors can update their preprints on Archive or Repec. If you're using Archive or Repec, you can actually, if you have already a preprint on Archive or Repec before you have submitted to an Elsevier journal, for example, Elsevier journals permit you to update your preprint to the accepted manuscript after peer review ends. Again, and as I mentioned, some journals, like those who operate double anonymous peer review, might have different preprint policies. Some might ask you to delay posting your preprint until peer review is concluded. This should appear in the journal's guide for authors. And preprints should not be added or enhanced in any way to appear like or substitute for the publisher's version of the article. So what about sharing accepted manuscripts? Again, so the accepted manuscript here has the same content as this article that appears on the publisher's website, or what we call the published journal article. Okay, if you have published Gold Open Access, then you can share the accepted manuscript or share the final publisher version, the publisher journal article, anytime you want. If you have published under the subscription model, then you can use a policy known as Green Open Access to share your accepted manuscript. Typically, sharing your accepted manuscript is delayed for what's called an embargo period. But there are some cases where you can share your accepted manuscript immediately. So I got accepted yesterday. I have the version that has come out of peer review, what we call the accepted manuscript. Generally, in order to share my accepted manuscript, I have to wait for what's called the embargo period. This is, again, I'm publishing subscription model here. Okay, if I'm publishing subscription model, then I'll have to wait for the embargo to start sharing my accepted manuscript. But there are some exceptions for sharing your accepted manuscript immediately. These are Elsevier policies here. There are similar policies with other publishers. Like, for example, via a non-commercial personal, if you have a personal website that's non-commercial, you can upload your accepted manuscript directly. This is Elsevier's policy. But if you have a preprint on Archive or Repec before you have submitted your paper, then you can actually update it into the accepted manuscript once peer review ends. Sharing privately is accessible to share your accepted manuscript within a closed internal group or repository within your institution. So if it's something that's only visible to your internal institution member, or if it's a research collaboration work group that is invitation only, like you create a group on Teams, for example, Microsoft Teams or Mendeley or any other collaboration tool. And if you are sharing your articles privately with a closed group that's invitation only, you can share your accepted manuscript there. You can directly provide copies to students or research collaborators. And for private scholarly sharing as part of an invitation only work group on commercial sites, that Elsevier has an agreement with, like Mendeley, for example, or others. Apart from those, the general case for sharing accepted manuscripts for subscription articles is after the embargo period, which differs from one journal to the other, via non-commercial hosting platforms like your institutional repository or commercial sites with which Elsevier has an agreement. Very important, we do not permit sharing accepted manuscripts or published journal articles for subscription articles on ResearchGate or academia.edu. These are examples for publishers, for websites that usually we have issues with copyright infringements happening over those websites. So it's actually unethical to be sharing. It's not part of an agreement. Elsevier does not permit sharing subscription articles as PGA or accepted manuscript on such platforms. For all accepted manuscripts that are shared, you should have a link to the formal publication via DOI. This addition here should be added to the to your accepted manuscript. It's a CC BY NC ND license, or what's called a Creative Commons license, that prevents any other from using it commercially or in a commercial derivative. And you just add this text here. You can get the updated text from Creative Commons. If it's aggregated with other manuscripts, like in an institutional repository, there is what's called Elsevier hosting policy, and the accepted manuscript should not be enhanced in any way to appear like or a substitute for the published journal article. Okay, so what about the final publisher version of the article that appears on the publisher website? If you have published gold or hybrid gold or diamond open access, then it's basically you can the article is accessible on the publisher website for anyone to read, and you can also host your PDF however you would like. But there are some end user terms that are there. If you are an academic, then you can request from Elsevier to have a commercial CC BY license. This allows reuse of the article in commercial purposes. The default is the non-commercial CC BY NC ND. So the difference is about later commercial use for the PDF again. But academics can easily just request from your editor when you have your paper accepted, just request that you have a CC BY license. If you have published a subscription article, then it's very important to know that you have to do what's called a copyright transfer to the publisher to be able to include that article in their subscription offerings, and actually to be able to sell the journal issues that has your article. So the proper way for sharing your article, if you have published a subscription article, is either to share the accepted manuscript after the embargo period, for the few exceptions for immediate sharing, to share your preprint, and if you want to share the published journal article, you should use the DOI link. Okay. For Elsevier journals, we have a policy called the share link. So basically, when you have published a paper with Elsevier, if it's a subscription paper, you get a link from Elsevier. Anybody who clicks on that link for 50 days, it will unlock the article for them, even if they don't have subscription to that journal. So anybody clicks on your specific share link can unlock your article for 50 days. After these 50 days, it will just work as a DOI link. So just directing people to the website, and whether or not they'll be able to read the article will depend on their subscription. And it's now up to you to do your best to get use your share link. Use it on your Twitter, use it on your social media, use it in the signature of your email, send it to your friends and colleagues. It's up to you to increase the readership of your article, to give immediate access to people. If you are able to share your share link very early on, that link will unlock the article for everyone. Okay, you can share published journal articles privately, like if somebody so if there is a student or a colleague that you are in a communication with, then you can send them the PDF of the publisher's PDF for personal use. That's permissible. And actually, for those of you who are using Mendeley, you know that you can create a group on Mendeley and share your entire library of PDFs with as part of the private sharing. This is permissible again. For theses and dissertations, it's okay to contain embedded like things that you have written up in your papers during your PhD work. It's okay to be reused within theses and dissertations. These theses and dissertation can be published publicly by the awarding institutions, but it should have DOI links. Again, this should appear in your reference list, or at least as a section for published work from this thesis that has the DOIs. If you want to share the PDF of other authors, then basically these are the PDFs that your library have subscription to. You can share them in classroom use. You can include them for grant funding purposes or private working groups. Okay, published journal articles again cannot be shared publicly, for example, on ResearchGate or academia.edu, as we mentioned. As a summary, pre-submission, that's when you share a preprint. After acceptance, you can after acceptance, you can share the accepted manuscript privately on your personal website or blog to refresh preprints on archive and repack, or privately on commercial partner sites. After publication, gold open access can be shared anywhere, anytime, via commercial platforms if it's a CC BY license. For subscription articles, it can be shared as a link. It can be shared privately or after the embargo, which is around 12 to 18 months. This is where you can share the accepted manuscript publicly on non-commercial platforms or commercial partner sites. Are there any questions? Let's see your questions to this point. Danishi, if you can help me with that.
Yes, Khaled, I can. So there's quite a few questions that came through. The one that was most recent is from Leslie: how problematic can preprints be for software plagiarism detectors?
All editors' preprints are now part of a norm or a culture in general. For an editor, and I've spoken with multiple editors about this, if an editor is doing a scan for plagiarism, like similarity tools like cross-check or authenticate or similar, if they find the 100% similarity and they see that the 100% similarity is coming from a preprint server, this is something that they have grown very accustomed to, and they just ignore that similarity. They actually exclude that source from the similarity report and look for other similarities with different sources than that. Again, it's perfectly normal and understood. Editors nowadays understand that very well, that it's okay to have full similarity with a preprint.
Perfect, thank you. And from Tishana, is sharing unpublished work safe? If unpublished work is freely available, does this not tempt people to steal data and publish elsewhere?
I think we've replied to that while we were talking, maybe after the question was asked. It actually helps protect your work by having your name, your date certified. It's part of your copyright. Nobody can plagiarize content from another person's preprint. It's actually a good way to protect your work.
Yes, and it lays claim to ideas It's also a way to communicate your research early, like for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a way to communicate findings fast. So it has a lot of benefits as well. And then the last question from Malcolm was, how do I filter journals that have temporary open access with a waiver to a particular date? It's hard to find them. Do you have any tips to only show journals and the APC waiver date of expiration? I just wanted to start by saying that Khaled has explained for those that's on the line, the APCs are only payable if you want to publish open access. You can publish your article under the subscription model without paying any APC. And there are various transformative agreements that are in place. So it depends on where you are and what agreement your university has with Elsevier, if you're thinking about publishing with Elsevier and you're thinking about publishing open access. So for example, for those that are from a South African university, you can publish in hybrid open access journals without paying the article publishing charge. And then in some countries in Africa, depending on whether you qualify under Research for Life as country list A or B, you also get waivers for the article publishing charge. However, it should be noted that it is only for open access publishing, and that is not the only method to get published. I get this question a lot in the Researcher Toolbox, where people believe that you have to pay to get published, and I just wanted to make that distinction. So those are the places you can check. I'm not sure if Khaled knows of any database which shows a list of journals that have a current waiver.
So
But
generally
offhand, I don't know.
waivers. So there are what's called hybrid journals. Hybrid journals are journals that offer both options to publish subscription without an APC or to publish with for a gold open access with paying the APC. These are called hybrid journals, and it's free for you to choose whichever how you would like your article would appear. It doesn't matter for the peer review process. It doesn't matter for any process. And actually that APC is only payable upon acceptance. There is a tool for Elsevier journals called Journal Finder that actually might help a little bit if you want to check your, if you want to write your abstract here or search by keywords, aims, and scope, and you could see results for, you can see actually results for all the journals with Elsevier with their current APC. So some journals, for example, if it's a newly launched journal, it might have a full waiver for their APC. You will see that if a journal is hybrid, so it offers subscription option, or if the journal is fully gold open access journal. So that's a journal that only publishes under the gold open access model. If a journal publishes exclusively under the gold open access model, if you are from many countries in Africa, get automatically 50% or 100% waivers if they are publishing in that journal. This is the case for all Sub-Sahara and North Africa. There are a few exceptions for countries that don't automatically get waiver, like Mauritius, Seychelles, and South Africa. This is for the fully gold open access journals. Other thing that can help actually is elsevier.com/authors. This is another portal where you can actually see a list of journals from Elsevier, and actually it can help you a little bit with choosing a journal from Elsevier. Again, there are similar platforms to help authors select journals by other publishers as well. I hope this answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And before we continue, to those that are raising their hands, please note that this is a webinar. so we are unable to unmute you. So please post your question if you have one in the Q&A box. And thanks to all those that have submitted questions as well. Back to you, Khaled.
Thank you, Danishi. So the Elsevier hosting policy is something that applies for if you are building an institutional repository. This is something that you would need to look into. Institutional repository are considered non-commercial platforms, and actually there are hosting guidelines for it. For any publisher, if you want to know, can I share this article or not, there is a website, a very useful website called howcanishareit.com. And if you want support from Elsevier on permissions, you can use this shortened link that you can see on the screen, bit.ly/els-permissions. This can help guide you a little bit into the legality of sharing an article there. So let's talk about more tips about enhancing your visibility. And I'm going to be talking, we talked about sharing your article already. I'm going to be giving some pointers on 3 things: leveraging social media for researchers, leveraging your own connections, and using media relations as well to promote your article. So one of the things that you would need to have, part of increasing the visibility of your own article, is to increase your visibility as an researcher in general. So it's very important to make sure that you have a profile on your institutional website. Having a personal website or a blog always comes in handy, but even if you don't have time to maintain that, it's very important to leverage your own social media, your LinkedIn profile, and what's called ORCID. And let me ask you here, do you have, who here has an ORCID, has set up an ORCID? So basically, ORCID issues a unique identifying number for each researcher. So what you need to do here is just go for orchid.com, sign in or register. You will get an ORCID ID that you can use as a tag, like you add it to all your manuscripts, and you can link that ORCID to databases like Scopus or Web of Science or others in order to make sure that your data is collected in one place. So if you are already, if you are on Scopus, whether you have full access to Scopus or Scopus Preview, one of the things that are very useful there is to look up author. This is again freely accessible on Scopus Preview even. Look up your name, look up your profile. So let's say, for example, I'm going to type in a researcher's name. This is, you can sometimes find that there are multiple instances. So 1 and 3 are 2 author profiles for the same researcher. So you can actually request to merge these profiles together. And there is an option here to add your ORCID ID here to make sure that all your publications are gathered in one place by Scopus. And you can do this with other databases as well. This is free to do and to use for anyone, anywhere. Okay, whether to create an account on ORCID or to claim your profile on Scopus. So when it comes to personal contact and networking, it's very important to know that presenting your work face-to-face creates a lot of impact. So it's useful to participate in conferences if your results, if you have some good results to show, but still not tell a full story for a journal article, you should consider publishing your work in a conference. The real value of a conference is not just as a publication that counts, but it comes in as the interaction and showcasing your work to others. When you attend a conference, your attendance in the conference is as successful as the number of potential collaborators that you have met in that conference. Okay, so I do remember one of my professors used to count how useful that conference was by how many funding proposals we were writing after the conference with other researchers that we have met through the conference that we have presented our work with. And this is something that you can go to Researcher Academy. And if you click on Career Path, you can actually see some very useful videos on career guidance here, including this how to network at conferences. This is a very useful 9-minute video that I strongly recommend for everyone. Other thing is consider presenting your work in other universities. You already have your connections, you have networks, you have friends at other universities. They are usually looking for people to deliver seminars in their universities. This is enriching for those universities, and it can be very enriching to your work to expose it to more people, to discuss it with more researchers at other universities. Invited lectures can be very useful. And if there is one thing that we have learned during the pandemic period is that everybody is now more okay with attending webinars online. Similar to what you are attending here today, you can hold your own webinars and video meetings. And you can actually leverage your own email signature to tell people about your article. Remember what I said about the share links. For social media, whichever you're using, I'm still using here the name Twitter. I haven't updated it to x.com. But anyway, if you're using Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, Twitter, these are all useful platforms to share your work. Some people actually, in order to maintain strong online presence, post regularly, add influential researchers to your network, engage in discussions and in groups or hashtags about trending topics that are related to your work. And one very useful tactic is to host an AMA. So let's, for example, I'm a researcher working on nutrition. So I can host an AMA where other researchers or even the public can ask me any question about anything related to my research work. This is very important tip here. How do you communicate your science to the general public beyond academia? This is where writing a lay summary or a summary for the layman becomes very, very important here. So this is a simplified version of your article in order for somebody who is not a scientist or not a scientist in your field to be able to read what you are working on. You can use these when you are sharing on social media, and you can use these with as a press release from your institution communication or a newsletter. And if you think there is interest from a wider audience, if you have published with Elsevier, our research communication team will be happy to help you prepare those press release and communicate with newspapers or mainstream media outlets, for example. So in general, the lay summary has to be very brief, has to be very succinct and simplified for the layman or the lay readers to be able to understand. It has 5 main sections: introduction, purpose, description of study, summary of findings, and why should I care about this as an ordinary person. So these are some advice for a good lay summary. First impressions. So start with the take-home message, what people need to know. Okay, that there are some risks associated to drinking too much coffee, for example, or there are some health benefits to that. So start with the take-home message. The reader answer the question, why are we here? Who says what? And why is this important? Avoid complex science terms or science jargon. If it's needed, you have to explain it very simple. Follow logical order. It doesn't need to be working in a temporal order of what happened first. Try to, again, know your stuff, your audience, and your limits here. Prioritize the essentials and the big picture. You need things that are short sentences with very plain and simple language, first person active voice. Use a lot of images, and it's very important when you're writing a lay summary, people are more interested in a story or in a take-home message than they are interested in scientific details, and focus on how does this impact the normal person outside academia. The last point here is sharing your data. So this is apart from writing the article itself, this is about sharing your data sets. This actually leads to more citation, increases your exposure, may lead to new collaborations, and it creates better credibility and reproducibility of your work. A study have shown that in the US, for example, that papers linked to data sets are often cited 25% more than papers without than papers without linked data sets to them. So what kind of data can you share? It could be raw data, it could be processed data, it could be protocols, methods, workflows, machine and environment settings, script analyses, algorithms. The raw data could include the transcripts of your interviews, the data from your surveys, and similar. But it's very important when you are sharing research data. One of the main principles here are what's called fair data principles. It has to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And of course, if these data, if you are talking about research with human subjects, then there are many ethical constraints about the anonymization of the data you are sharing. There are much more to talk about when it comes to open data, but this is just as a point of start here. Okay, and you can use a platform from Elsevier that's freely accessible to you. It's Mendeley Data. You can share data sets up to 10 gigabytes. In the free version of Mendeley Data, you can actually store, share privately or publicly, and publish data sets and get a DOI link for them. You can actually host your data set online and set an embargo period for when they can appear online. All these features you can do through Mendeley Data, including getting a citable DOI for your data set. And again, as I mentioned, the Open Science, the free layer of Mendeley allows 10 gigabytes of data. And you can actually use Mendeley Data to search for data sets from other researchers as well to use in your own research. Finally, as a last point, it's very useful to track the performance of your article, whether at the article level metrics or on your researcher profile. The article level metrics include the number of citations in addition to alternative metrics. So for example, you can check the Plumex metrics for your article on ScienceDirect, or if you've published with any other publisher, that publisher probably provides alternative metrics on their platform. But you can see also the Plumex metrics on Scopus for any article. You can see the number of reads, mentions on social media, and others. It's very important to claim and maintain your Scopus author profile. Check your author metrics on SciVal and evaluate your collaborations on SciVal as well. These are examples of the alternative Plumex metrics, like social media, citation, usage, clicks, views, downloads, captures, bookmarks, favorites, mentions in social media and in mainstream media. And again, as a reminder, please validate your Scopus author profiles because they help remove author ambiguity and help track all your research to one place. We've already mentioned the ORCID and how it works. With that, I'm brought to the end of our session here today. I'd like to remind you with our Elsevier Africa Facebook page, where this webinar is being live streamed now. You can actually go to Elsevier Africa and check the live stream video. It becomes a recording once the webinar has been concluded. So that's for the question of getting the recordings. I believe also the Zoom recording can be shared with you as well. Right, Danishri?
That's right, Khaled. Thank you very much. I think if it's possible, would you mind sharing your presentation with me, and I will share that with the attendees as well?
I will, definitely.
Okay, so there's a lot of good comments that are in the chat box. Thanking you for your presentation today. And personally, I'd like to thank you for both the sessions that you hosted for us in the Researcher Toolbox. It was really useful, very relatable, very understandable. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So thanks a lot, Khaled.
Pleasure is all mine. It's been a pleasure to be with you here today. And I'm sorry for running a little bit over the hour mark. I hope this session was useful to you. Please do let us know of your feedback. We would very much appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks to the participants for attending. I look forward to seeing you in the further sessions that we'll be hosting this year. And please, do make use of the Africa Researcher Success Portal. If you just Google those words, you'll be able to get onto the site and find the further links for registration, as well as the recording of today's session. So I'll stop the recording here.